The fall and transformation of Rome. In the fading light of the ancient world, as marble statues cracked and ivy crept over once mighty forums, the question echoes through the centuries: did Rome truly fall, or did it simply change its shape? The story begins not with a single moment of collapse, but with a slow unraveling. A grand empire that stretched from the misty moors of Britannia to the burning sands of Arabia, from the cold forests of Germania to the marble shores of the Mediterranean Pennsylvania. It was the world's first superpower, a civilization built on law, conquest, and an unyielding belief in its own eternity. And yet, eternity is an illusion that history never keeps. By the late 4th century, the Roman Empire stood both magnificent and fragile. Its armies still marched beneath the proud eagle standards, but the glory they carried was fading, weighed down by debt, corruption, and the heavy toll of ambition. The roads that once tied the world together were still there, stretching across continents. Yet along them now came whispers of fear. Barbarian raiders crossing frozen rivers, soldiers unpaid, citizens disillusioned, emperors murdered by their own guards. The dream of Rome was cracking, but no one inside could see it clearly. To those who lived through it, Rome was eternal, but history would prove otherwise. In its beginning, Rome was never destined for quiet death. It was born from conflict, from the fires of legend. A city founded, as the myth says, by twin brothers suckled by a she-wolf, Romulus and Remus, its origins told in blood and ambition. Through centuries of kings, republics, and emperors, Rome had survived every challenge. Hannibal at the gates, civil wars, plagues, assassinations. But what no sword could conquer, time itself would. The late empire was a paradox of magnificence and decay. Grand monuments rose even as farms were abandoned. The emperors built walls while their borders dissolved. Diocletian and Constantine had tried to save it, reforming the government, dividing the empire into east and west, raising taxes, reorganizing the army. But every cure seemed to wound another part of the body. The empire had grown too vast, too complex, too heavy for its own foundation. In the West, Rome's heart was beating slower. The Senate still met, the legions still swore loyalty, but the meaning of Rome was drifting away, carried eastward to the shining new capital of Constantinople. There, in the city of Constantine, the empire's pulse continued, Greek-speaking, Christian, resilient. The East endured, the West withered. It was in this twilight that new peoples appeared on Rome's horizon. Visigoths, Vandals, Franks, Ostrogoths, tribes who once feared the legions, now pressing against their borders with restless hunger. The Romans called them barbarians, yet many had lived within the empire for generations, trading, serving in the army, adopting its ways. But then the Huns thundered into Europe from the east, and a tidal wave of refugees crashed into Roman lands. The empire, stretched thin, tried to absorb them, to control them, but chaos followed. In 376, a desperate mass of Gothic refugees begged for asylum along the Danube. Roman officials, corrupt and greedy, exploited them, starving them, selling their children into slavery. What followed was rebellion. At Adrianople in 378, the Roman army marched to crush the Goths and was annihilated. Emperor Valens himself perished on the battlefield, his body lost among the dead. It was a wound that never healed. Rome had faced defeat before, but this was different. The legions, once the symbol of invincibility, had been broken by the very people they sought to subdue. From that moment, the empire began to depend on barbarian mercenaries to fight its wars. Men who owed loyalty not to Rome, but to gold and survival. Over the next decades, emperors rose and fell like shadows. The real power lay in generals, Stilicho, Ricimer, and others, men of foreign blood commanding Roman armies. The lines between Roman and barbarian blurred. And then, in the year 410, the unimaginable happened. Alaric, king of the Visigoths, marched into Italy. Rome, the eternal city, untouched by enemy hands for 800 years, fell. For 3 days, its streets burned. Churches and temples were looted, noble houses ransacked. The world was stunned down arrow. Saint Jerome, writing from Bethlehem, captured the shock. Who could have believed that Rome, which conquered the world, would fall? Yet even then, Rome did not die. The city survived. The empire staggered on, battered but breathing. The West was fragmenting, provinces slipping away, Britain abandoned, Gaul carved by warlords, Spain and Africa trembling under barbarian advance. Still, emperors continued to reign, hollow figures cloaked in ceremony, their decrees echoing through empty halls. In the East, the Byzantine Empire, rich, urban, fortified, watched with both pity and calculation. Constantinople sent aid when it suited, ignored the West when it did not. The idea of Rome was no longer a single empire, but two worlds drifting apart. By mid-century, new powers rose where Roman legions once stood. The Vandals captured Carthage, Rome's old rival, and turned it into a kingdom of their own. They built fleets, ruled the Mediterranean, and in 455 sailed to Italy to sack Rome again, this time with ruthless precision. The emperor watched helplessly as his capital was plundered for 14 days. The city that had ruled the known world now stood as a relic of its own glory. The Roman people still called themselves Romans, still prayed to old gods or the new Christian faith, but the empire around them was fading into memory. The army was no longer Roman, but a patchwork of Gothic, Alan, and Hun mercenaries. The economy, once fed by conquest, now devoured itself through taxation and corruption. And yet, amidst the ruin, there remained brilliance. Artists, philosophers, bishops, chroniclers who recorded the end with quiet dignity. Augustine wrote The City of God, arguing that no earthly empire could be eternal. True salvation lay beyond this world. It was both an elegy and a prophecy. By the late 5th century, the Western Empire was but a ghost. Its emperors were children, its generals kings in all but name. In 476, the final curtain fell, not with thunder, but with bureaucracy. Odoacer, a Germanic general, deposed the boy emperor Romulus Augustulus and sent the imperial insignia to Constantinople, declaring that the West needed no emperor. Rome, as a political power, had ended. But was it truly the end, or only a transformation? For the people who lived through it, life went on. Towns still traded, fields still yielded grain, churches still sang hymns. The barbarian kings who took over did not destroy Rome. They became it. They adopted Latin, Roman law, Roman titles. The Ostrogoths under Theodoric ruled Italy as heirs of the Caesars, preserving the Senate, repairing aqueducts, maintaining the illusion of continuity. In Gaul, the Franks rose under Clovis, blending Roman administration with Germanic strength. Even the Vandals and Visigoths minted coins with the emperor's image. Rome had not vanished. It had dissolved into the veins of Europe. the Eastern Empire thrived. From Constantinople, emperors like Justinian would reclaim Italy, rebuild monuments, and codify Roman law into the Corpus Juris Civilis, a foundation for modern governance. To the Byzantines, they were not the Eastern Empire. They were simply Romans. For them, the fall of Rome was unthinkable. The idea of Rome proved stronger than its armies, more enduring than its walls. It became a faith, a memory, a template for power. Even centuries later, when Charlemagne was crowned in 800 as Emperor of the Romans, the dream of Rome was reborn in the West. The Holy Roman Empire, the papacy, the very notion of empire itself, all carried Rome's ghost forward. The barbarians who had destroyed it had, in truth, become its heirs. Perhaps then, Rome did not fall at all. It transformed. From marble to memory. From empire to idea. Arrow up. The transformation of Rome was not a sudden metamorphosis, but a long and painful evolution, written in fire, stone, and faith. In the centuries that followed, Europe was littered with the fragments of an empire. Roads, aqueducts, fortresses, laws, and languages, all remnants of a civilization that refused to vanish. The peasants who tilled the soil in Gaul, the monks who illuminated manuscripts in Irish abbeys, the merchants who bartered in the ports of Naples or Ravenna, all were unknowingly carrying the embers of Rome into the future. Yet to those living in the aftermath, it did not feel like transformation. It felt like darkness descending. The roads grew dangerous, cities shrank, trade dwindled, and knowledge, once cherished in marble halls, retreated behind monastery walls. The Roman world had been built on the certainty of order. Now, uncertainty reigned. The western provinces splintered into kingdoms, each ruled by men who spoke of honor and faith, but ruled through sword and fear. Still, even as the light dimmed, it never went out completely. The Christian Church, which had once been persecuted by emperors, became the guardian of Rome's soul. Bishops replaced governors. Latin prayers replaced decrees. The Church preserved what the empire had forgotten: literacy, law, and the dream of unity. In Rome itself, the Pope slowly emerged as a new kind of emperor, spiritual, not military. From the ruins of the Forum, he extended his influence across Europe, crowning kings, anointing rulers, and reminding them all that the city of Rome, though fallen, still commanded reverence. The papacy became the thread that connected the broken fragments of the old world. Through the Church, Rome lived on, not as an empire of soldiers, but as an empire of faith. And so began a new age, one historians would later call the Middle Ages, though to those who lived it, it was simply the world reborn. Yet in Constantinople, the Eastern Empire still glowed with imperial splendor. Its domes shimmered with gold, its bureaucracy hummed with the precision of Roman law, and its armies, though embattled, defended the empire's frontiers with a discipline that would have made Caesar proud. Here, Greek and Roman blended into something new: Byzantine. The emperors of this Eastern Rome still dreamed of reunification, of restoring the old empire's unity. Justinian I came closest. In the 6th century, his armies under Belisarius reconquered Africa, Italy, and parts of Spain. momentarily stitching together the torn fabric of empire. In Constantinople, he built the Hagia Sophia, a cathedral so vast, so luminous, that those who entered believed they had glimpsed heaven itself. Yet Justinian's triumphs were fleeting. Plague swept through the empire, killing millions. Wars drained the treasury. When the dust settled, the dream of a unified Rome once again slipped beyond reach. The Mediterranean, once Mare Nostrum, our sea, was no longer Roman. New powers were rising on every shore. The Lombards in Italy, the Franks in Gaul, the Arabs in the East, whose new faith would soon challenge both Byzantium and the remnants of Rome's Christian world. Still, the ghost of Rome persisted, shaping every new empire that dared to rise. When Islamic scholars translated Aristotle and Galen, they were preserving Roman knowledge. When Frankish kings issued decrees in Latin, they were echoing Roman law. When emperors and popes quarreled over authority, they were reenacting the eternal struggle between Caesar and the Senate, between crown and conscience. Rome was no longer a place, it was a mirror, reflecting every age that followed. Yet the question that haunts historians endures. Why did Rome fall at all? Was it moral decay, economic collapse, military overstretch, or the inevitable entropy of power? Some say it was luxury, that the Romans grew soft, preferring silk and spectacle to discipline and duty. Others blame politics. Endless civil wars, assassinations, ambition tearing the state from within. Economists point to inflation, to the devaluation of currency, to the crushing weight of taxation on the poor. Environmental scholars speak of climate shifts, of harvest failures, and disease. And then there are those who whisper that Rome did not fall for any single reason. It simply evolved into a form it could sustain. Each theory holds a fragment of truth, but none capture the whole. Empires are not machines that break. They are living organisms that change. For 400 years, Rome adapted to every crisis, barbarian invasions, plagues, usurpers, and each time, it survived. But in the end, the empire's greatest strength, its ability to absorb and assimilate, became its undoing. The more it blended with the world, the less distinct it became. The barbarians no longer feared Rome because they had become Romans themselves. The imperial identity, once fierce and unyielding, had dissolved into universality. Perhaps that was the ultimate victory, and the ultimate tragedy. The fall of Rome was not a cataclysm, but a diffusion, the spreading of its essence into every corner of Europe and beyond. In that sense, Rome did not die. It conquered eternity, up arrow. And yet, if history teaches us anything, it is that no fall is final. The story of Rome's transformation is not merely one of decay, but of inheritance, of how an empire's death gave birth to 1,000 new beginnings. In Byzantium, the mosaics of emperors still gleamed beneath candlelight, as Greek scholars preserved the texts of Plato, Aristotle, and Galen. They guarded the wisdom of the ancients through centuries of siege and flame. When Constantinople finally fell to the Ottomans in 1453, it was not the end of Rome's legacy, but another act of transmission. For the fleeing scholars carried their manuscripts westward into Italy, where they would ignite the Renaissance, the rebirth of classical learning, the rediscovery of Rome itself. Michelangelo, Leonardo, and Raphael painted beneath domes inspired by Roman engineering. Machiavelli studied Roman politics, and the architects of St. Peter's Basilica built their masterpiece upon the bones of imperial grandeur. In that way, Rome rose again. Not as an empire of armies, but as a civilization of ideas. Even beyond Europe, Rome's shadow stretched across continents. The British Empire would later call itself the New Rome, its administrators quoting Cicero, its legions marching beneath standards that echoed the eagle. In the young Republic of America, the Founding Fathers, steeped in classical education, named their Senate, their capital, their republic after Rome, convinced they were inheriting its virtues while avoiding its mistakes. Yet the same cycles of expansion, corruption, and moral struggle that haunted Rome began to echo in the modern age, reminding humanity that no empire escapes the gravity of time. In every age, new Romes are born, each believing itself eternal, each eventually learning the same truth. Power is fleeting, but ideas endure. The transformation of Rome thus becomes a mirror held to humanity's face, a reflection of our desire for permanence in a world built on change. The empire's fall invites not only mourning, but understanding. That civilization is not measured by the monuments it leaves behind, but by the ideas that survive its collapse. Law, language, architecture, government, religion. Rome's fingerprints remain on them all. The Latin tongue still whispers in the vocabulary of science and faith. Roman law still shapes modern justice. Roman roads, buried and forgotten, still underlie the paths we walk. Every city built with order and symmetry, every debate on liberty and authority, every notion of citizenship, these are Rome's children. And yet, even as we inherit Rome's brilliance, we inherit its warnings. The empire that once united the world was undone by its own contradictions. Wealth built on inequality, strength eroded by complacency, tolerance replaced by arrogance. In its last days, the Romans built walls instead of bridges, hoarded gold instead of hope, clung to the past instead of preparing for the future. It is a story as old as humanity itself, a story we tell again and again, perhaps because we fear it might one day be ours. Imagine for a moment standing on the Palatine Hill at dawn. The sun rises over the Tiber, spilling light across the ruins, the arches, the columns, the broken amphitheaters. The wind carries faint echoes of Latin prayers, and the distant clatter of chariots long gone. For a heartbeat, time folds. The ancient and the modern, the living and the lost. You realize that Rome never truly left. It lingers in the very idea of civilization, in the way we build, govern, and dream. The empire fell, yes, but its essence transformed into something vaster, more enduring than marble. Memory. In that memory lies both warning and wonder. The warning is clear, that no empire, however mighty, can escape the erosion of time and pride. The wonder is eternal, that even in ruin, Rome remains magnificent. Its stones may be broken, its legions gone, but its story still commands awe 2,000 years later. Perhaps that is the secret the Romans understood better than anyone, that true immortality is not in power, but in legacy. And so the tale ends where it began, not with the ashes of defeat, but with the spark of continuity. The fall of Rome was not a collapse into darkness. It was a sunrise disguised as dusk. Out of its ruins came the medieval kingdoms, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the very foundations of the modern world. Its transformation reminds us that endings are seldom final. They are passages, thresholds, the turning of one page to the next. The Roman world did not vanish. It became us. We are its inheritors, its dreamers, its distant descendants walking among its ghosts. And perhaps, somewhere deep within the ruins of time, if we listen closely, we can still hear the heartbeat of the eternal city. Steady, defiant, whispering through the centuries. Roma eterna non cadit. Rome eternal does not fall. Entrenched.